The scorching Kenyan sun beat down on the dry savanna as dust devils swirled across the parched earth. It was July 18, 2012, when Ranger Michael Koikai first spotted her through his binoculars, a solitary figure lying motionless under an acacia tree in the Masai Mara National Reserve. "There's something wrong with that lioness," he whispered to his colleague David. "She hasn't moved for hours." The two rangers approached cautiously. What they saw made their hearts sink. The magnificent lioness, her tawny coat dulled by dust and desperation, lay trapped, a metal wire cutting deep into her front paw. "Poachers!" David spat the word like venom. "Wire snare. She's been here for days by the looks of it." The lioness's eyes, once fierce amber flames, now flickered weakly as she watched the rangers. There was no fear in those eyes, only exhaustion. Her cubs were nowhere to be seen. Michael radioed the wildlife veterinary team immediately. Female lion approximately 4 years old, snare wound on left front paw, condition critical. Location, eastern sector, 5 kilometers from Talek Gate. Dr. Sarah Wilson arrived within the hour, her face grim as she prepared the tranquilizer dart. The lioness barely reacted as the dart found its mark in her hindquarters. 10 minutes later, the team moved in. "The wires cut through to the bone," Dr. Wilson murmured, carefully removing the cruel snare. "Infections set in. We're looking at severe tissue damage, possible nerve damage. I don't know if she'll ever use this paw properly again." They named her Furaha, Swahili for joy, though there was little joy about her situation. With gentle hands, they lifted her onto a tarp and into the back of the veterinary truck. The journey to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was tense and silent. Furaha's wound slowly healed, but her spirit remained as damaged as her paw had been. She limped around her enclosure, her once proud gait now halting and unsure. The staff worried that the psychological trauma of captivity might prove as deadly as the snare had nearly been. "She's not eating enough," Dr. Wilson noted on September 28th, writing in her log with concern. "At this rate, she'll never build up the strength to return to the wild, and I'm not sure she even wants to anymore." That night, a violent thunderstorm rolled across the reserve. Lightning split the sky as rain hammered down on the metal roof of the rehabilitation center. In the morning, the staff arrived to find Furaha's enclosure empty. A section of fencing torn away by a fallen branch. "She's gone," Michael said, his voice hollow with disappointment. "After everything we did." The team spent days searching, but the lioness had vanished into the vast expanse of the Mara. Most believed she wouldn't survive. A weakened predator with a permanent disability had little chance against the harsh realities of the wild. "We failed her," Dr. Wilson said, staring out across the savanna one evening in early October. "I really thought we could save her." Life at the rehabilitation center continued. Other animals came and went. A cheetah cub orphaned by farmers, an elephant with a bullet wound, a rhino blinded in one eye by poachers. The memory of Furaha faded as weeks turned to months. Until December 3rd, 2012, when Michael's radio crackled to life during a routine patrol. "You're going to want to see this," came David's voice, tight with excitement. "Eastern sector, same spot where we found her." Michael's heart raced as he drove to the coordinates. There, under the same acacia tree where they had first discovered her, lay Furaha. But she wasn't alone. 3 tiny cubs tumbled over each other in the grass beside her, their spotted coats gleaming in the sunlight. And beyond them, sprawled in the shade, was a male lion, a massive battle-scarred king of the savannah. "She found a pride," Michael whispered, watching through binoculars as one of the cubs pounced on its mother's tail. Furaha batted it away gently, her movements still showing signs of her injury, but her eyes were bright with life once more. The team monitored her from a distance, careful not to interfere. They watched as she taught her cubs to hunt, compensating for her weakness with remarkable intelligence. When the pride brought down a wildebeest, she would approach from the animal's blind side, using her disability as a strategy rather than allowing it to be a limitation. "She's not just surviving," Dr. Wilson remarked one day in February 2013. "She's thriving." The story might have ended there, a satisfying tale of rescue and recovery, but Furaha's journey had only just begun. In March 2013, the eastern region of the Mara faced its worst drought in decades. Waterholes dried up, and prey animals migrated away in search of grass. The lions followed, all except Furaha and her cubs, who remained behind. "She can't keep up with the pride's pace," Michael explained sadly. "Her injury slows her down too much for such a long journey." The situation grew dire. Furaha grew thinner, and her cubs' ribs began to show through their fur. The rangers debated intervening, but hesitated to undo all the progress she had made toward true independence. Then came the morning of April 9th. As dawn broke over the savannah, David spotted something unusual. Furaha was leading her cubs toward the rehabilitation center. The staff watched in astonishment as the lioness approached the facility where she had once been held captive. She stopped at the perimeter, sitting on her haunches, her amber eyes fixed on the building. "She remembers," Dr. Wilson breathed. "She's asking for help." The decision was made quickly. They would provide food, just enough to sustain the small family until the rains came. A fresh impala carcass was placed near the fence, far enough away to prevent habituation, but close enough for Furaha to find. Night after night she returned, sometimes waiting patiently for hours until the humans withdrew before leading her cubs to the offering. And each time, she seemed to look directly at the observation window, where Dr. Wilson often sat watching. Then, on May 2nd, the rains finally came. Great sheets of water transformed the parched landscape, bringing new life to the savannah. Almost overnight, the plains were carpeted in green, and the migrating herds began to return. Furaha stopped coming to the rehabilitation center. "That's it then," Dr. Wilson said, a mixture of sadness and pride in her voice. "She doesn't need us anymore." But the story of Furaha was far from over. 2 years later, in June 2015, a new threat emerged in the Mara. A gang of poachers had been targeting lions, selling their parts to illegal wildlife traders. 3 lions had already been killed when rangers discovered a poachers' camp hidden in a remote northern sector. "They're planning something big," Michael reported after examining the abandoned site. "Snares, rifles, even poison darts. They're after an entire pride." The Kenya Wildlife Service mounted an operation to catch the poachers, but the criminals seemed to vanish into thin air each time the rangers got close. It became a deadly game of cat and mouse across the vast savannah. On the night of June 18th, Michael and David were on stakeout near a known poaching hotspot when they heard gunshots in the distance. They raced toward the sound, calling for backup as their vehicle bounced over the rough terrain. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. 3 men lay on the ground, 2 unconscious, 1 clutching a bleeding leg. Their weapons were scattered around them, and circling them, like shadows in the moonlight, was a pride of lions, led by a limping lioness with fierce amber eyes. "Furaha," Michael breathed in disbelief. The lioness stood over the fallen poachers, not attacking but preventing escape. When the ranger's vehicle approached, she stepped back, her gaze meeting Michael's for a brief, electric moment. As if satisfied that justice would now be served, Furaha turned away, her cubs, now nearly grown, following behind her. The pride melted into the darkness, leaving the stunned poachers to the ranger's custody. "She saved those other lions," David said later. "Somehow, she knew what these men were planning to do." The legend of Furaha, the lioness who survived a snare to become a guardian of the Mara, spread throughout Kenya. Rangers would occasionally spot her distinctive limping gait on their patrols, always from a distance, always wild and free. Dr. Sarah Wilson often returns to that spot under the acacia tree, where a broken lioness once lay dying. "We didn't just save a lion that day," she says, watching the golden grasses wave in the breeze. Today, a new generation of cubs plays in the shadow of that same tree, their mother watching over them with amber eyes that have seen both cruelty and kindness, and chosen to remember the latter. The story of Furaha continues, written in paw prints across the savannah of the Masai Mara, a testament to the extraordinary resilience of nature and the difference that human compassion can make in the darkest of moments. If you enjoyed, then watch our next video shown on screen.